recorded, and we ask that you please keep your video cameras off during the session to ensure that our speakers and our interpreters remain highlighted for all of our viewers. And then our last housekeeping item before we begin with the content, we wanted to flag that our Eventbrite site, which is the site that we use to register for these events, was experiencing some technical difficulties earlier in the day today. So some folks that may have tried to register earlier this morning may have experienced some challenges when trying to register. So we were able to confirm that the site is back up and running, but did add an auto reply to our inbox with the direct link to the session. And then we will also be adding that direct link to our chat box momentarily as well, so that you all can flag the site link for folks, for your colleagues, for your friends who may have had difficulty joining, just in case. With that, I think we are ready to begin. My name is Christina Messa. I am the Chief of the CalWORKs and Family Resilience Branch at the California Department of Social Services. It is my pleasure once again to be able to join you all for the call this afternoon to assist with some of the facilitation. And we also have joining us some guest speakers and presenters, so excited to have some folks joining, and one being our director of the Department of Social Services, our Director Kim Johnson. So I will actually turn it over to Kim to do a welcome.
Thank you so much, Christina, and good afternoon, everyone. Again, Kim Johnson, Director of the California Department of Social Services. I just want to start by thanking those who may have children at home for all that you're doing to balance all things and have been doing over this past year, which has been challenging. We are seeing, as we are, of course, the entity over licensing of childcare development programs, some reopening. So we're super excited to see more programs getting back online and rebuilding our capacity across California. Also just want to take a moment to thank each of you who is a program administrator, a member of the workforce, every day caring for children and making sure that they have everything they need to be successfully developing and thriving and meeting their milestones. Again, and also recognizing that children have additional needs and supports on the emotional and mental health side, as they may not have before, with, again, all that all families are experiencing. So just thank you so much for what you do each and every day. It's greatly appreciated. And I just want to say, as we are reaching this milestone of the 4th quarterly meeting, how much I want to appreciate each of you for also doing those things and participating with us on this critical transition. So huge appreciation and shout out to all of the team at the Department of Education who has been onboarding and transitioning a large volume of information with the Department of Social Services team. A huge shout out to the Department of Social Services team for all that you're doing to receive that information and develop new systems, et cetera, to make sure this is seamless and supports children and families and program administrators in the best way that we can. So, in great appreciation to all, thank you for spending your afternoon with us today and for your continued input to shape this in a way that really truly builds on the great strengths of the system and continues to improve them. So thank you so much for being here. I'll turn it back over to you, Christina.
Thanks so much for the intro, Kim. And with that, we will dive into our agenda in just a minute, but we wanted to take a moment to recognize that we are almost to July 1st, when the operation of childcare programs will transition from the California Department of Education to the Department of Social Services. We wanted to take a moment to remind folks that this is not the end of these quarterly update calls. They will continue until 2024 as we work through the transition and as the transition moves forward through legislative changes to help foster alignment amongst these programs, as well as other key priorities and response efforts. This will be an opportunity for us to provide those related updates. And again, as Kim mentioned, or Director Johnson mentioned just a moment ago, Greatly appreciate your partnership and participation in these sessions, not just on the content we review, but also in terms of making these sessions accessible and user-friendly for all of our stakeholders. So any comments or feedback related to the translation services, greatly appreciated to make sure we are being as inclusively as we administratively can. Moving now into our agenda for our call this afternoon, we will be providing an overview of the transition and some of the work that we've been able to do in the transition space. We'll also be providing a third quarter specific progress update. So providing you all with an update of all of the activity that happened this past quarter. We'll share that we reached a couple of really key critical milestones. So excited to dive in those with you all. We'll also have a minute to go over upcoming activities, as well as future stakeholder engagement opportunities to make sure we continue to engage throughout the transition. And then we'll also have some time at the end for questions and comments. Next slide, please. Thank you, Corey. And just as a reminder for those of you who have joined us before on these stakeholder calls or in our other stakeholder sessions, this slide provides some background for those who have joined us before. You may be familiar with this slide, but those who are new, this slide provides some critical background. And the transition of childcare programs was authorized under the Early Childhood and Development Act of 2020, otherwise referred to as SB 98. The goals of SB 98 are briefly referenced here in the slide with the intent to support the state system of early learning and care in becoming more integrated and coordinated to achieve the broader goals of promoting a high quality, affordable early childhood and care system designed to comprehensively and effectively serve children and families, much like the goals that we recognized and were included as part of the Master Plan for Early Learning and Care. In addition to this, SB 98 also highlights and recognizes that, in addition to the summary, provided on this slide, that folks can also see some of the additional outcomes referenced here on our site. But in particular, SB 98 recognizes the social determinants of health, adverse childhood experiences, quality learning and care for children, and economic and other supports for the needs of families are critical determinants of life outcomes for children in California's system of early learning and care, recognizing that the system must address inequities and disproportionalities. Again, this information is detailed a little further with additional outcomes that are outlined as part of SB 98 on our transition-focused website. We do have a slide with that website link referenced for you all, so we'll make sure to highlight that for you. In addition to the background information and outcomes around SB 98, we also have the full list of transferring programs, and it also hosts many of the resources that we will be diving into in just a moment in our presentation. With that, if we can go to the next slide, please. Thank you. And with that, I have the pleasure of introducing our next speaker, the Deputy Director of the Family Engagement and Empowerment Division at the California Department of Social Services, Jennifer Hernandez.
Thank you, Christina. Good afternoon, everyone. Great to be here. Thank you, Christina, for walking us through the legislation that is authorizing the child care and development transfer. Really appreciate that. We'll go ahead and drop in the chat the link to the quarterly report, which is what I will speak to in a minute, and just flagging that the report is also available in Spanish. So I want to make sure that folks are able to review that as well. Okay, next slide, please. Thank you. So CDE and CDSS have been hard at work over the last few months, collaborating on various issues, and we wanted to highlight a few of those that are called out in the report. I think the real key is really getting us to July 1st, and what we've heard from you is that you want additional information around some of these key subjects. So as it relates to contracts, the conversations that we've been having have really gotten us to the place where CDE will continue to execute pending 2021 and 22 agreements under the existing process. And CDSS will issue apportionments for the July 1st, 2021 agreements after the enactment of the 2021-22 Budget Act upon the availability of that funding. So again, really wanting to give credence to the process that's currently in place and ensure that there are no disruptions, right? Secondly, CDE and DSS have completed trailer bill language to execute the transfer of the child care programs statutes from the Education Code to Welfare Code, Welfare and Institution Code, while also updating certain health and safety codes that would be necessary to implement a transition. And so that information has been publicly posted, and we will shortly drop some information into the chat where you can find that additional information. I also want to flag that we have been maintaining our websites and have been in discussions and working towards a plan of ensuring that there is collaboration and transition of the websites that are currently at CDE and ensuring that the corresponding information is transferred over to CDSS. There may be instances in where some of that information is shared. And so we are working to make sure that you have a place to go to on July 1st on the DSS side to access the information that you are used to finding on the CDE websites. Another update we wanted to call out is that there is a key milestones and transition timeline that has been posted on the Child Care Transfer website. It's a supplement to the transition plan, and it was developed in collaboration with CDE and really outlines some of the key milestones and timelines that will get us to July 1st and post July 1st to ensure that there's a successful transition moving forward. So with that, we will move on to the next slide. Thank you. So one thing that we wanted to reinforce here is that in terms of the staffing, there are approximately 187.5 CDE staff that will be transferring over to on July 1st across the various programs into the Department of Social Services. They will be incorporated into the new Child Care and Development Division, the Child and Adult Care Food Program, which I'll speak a little bit to later, along with other areas of the department. So many of the folks that you will be interacting with are those that you already have long-lasting relationships with. And so that's really critical to emphasize in this transition moving forward post July 1st. I think the second point to make here is that in the Governor's Spring Finance Letter process, there were additional requests made to make sure that we had sufficient staffing resources to support the implementation, the transition of the plan. Additionally, CDSS and CDE have also submitted budget change proposals, which are again, have also been publicly posted on the Department of Finance website to ensure that there are adequate staffing supports post July 1st. We recognize that with this transition, there will be a need to ensure that all the programs are running and adequately supported. And so those resources are being proposed through those BCPs that are available on the DOF website. And we will drop that link into the chat here shortly. Okay, next slide, please. And with that, I will turn it back to Christina to say a little bit more about their federal funding around COVID relief.
Thank you so much, Jennifer. And as Jennifer mentioned, next we are going to review the Federal Coronavirus Response and Relief Supplemental Appropriations Act, otherwise referred to as CRISA. And this funding and the process of dispersing some of the additional benefits supported by these funds. As many of you may know, the state has been working closely with the Child Care Providers United Union, or CCPU, and through this partnership with CCPU came the ratification of an agreement on the expenditure plan and allocation of the CRISA funds. So of those items, we have the first as part of the first plan listed here. And the first item was around extending the existing child care vouchers for our essential workers, as well as our at-risk children and our children with disabilities and special healthcare needs, creating new vouchers for these children. We also funded our CRISA also funded the $525 per child stipends for subsidized childcare providers. For this item, just wanting to also share that we do have a public-facing childcare stipends website that lists all details of the distribution of the childcare stipends for stage 1 childcare providers. We'll link that in chat in just a moment. As a reminder, CDE, the California Department of Education, oversees the administration and disbursement of stipends related to stages 2 and 3 childcare providers, while the Department of Social Services oversees the administration and disbursement of stipends for the stage 1 childcare providers. For the Department of Social Services stipend program, we contract with the Foundation for California Community Colleges, a nonprofit organization, to disperse checks to some of our providers who do not currently have a payment relationship with local alternative payment programs or APPs. And we distribute funds also through this partnership with the foundation directly to APPs to administer stipends to providers in their local networks, again, for those stage 1 childcare providers. We did host a webinar on March 18th for these $525 stipends referenced in this slide for our APP partners to review the payment disbursement process. There is a virtual form that must be completed by our APPs to ensure that payment is made accurately, and that APPs also have the option and can select that through this virtual form of receiving either direct deposit of those payments or a check. APPs started to receive these funds in late March, and for those APPs who completed the virtual form quickly after that March 18th webinar that I just referenced, those payments went out in about 5 to 7 business days. Most of our APPs have already been provided stipend funds or the stipend payments. Again, this is for the stage 1 child care provider network APP folks, with just a few pending that we are in the process of conducting some follow-up. Again, if folks have questions, we have additional information available on our child care stipends website, as well as contact information for any additional questions that folks aren't able to get responses from on the website that we have live now. In addition to stipend vouchers, the CRISA funds also supported an increase to providers paid non-operational days, moving that number from 14 days to 30 days. And then lastly, for this first agreement, it also allocated $156 million for new and extended alternative payment or AP voucher slots, as well as to help support and cover some of those administrative costs. With that, before we move to the next slide, there are a couple of additional resources that we would like to share. As a result of the agreement that I referenced earlier with the Child Care Providers Union, there was a work group that was formed consisting of state and CCPU representatives, and that has been established to discuss uses for the remaining federal CRISA funds to address COVID-19 pandemic needs and network preservation as well. The work group that I just referenced, they began meeting this past quarter to develop an agreement between both parties regarding the COVID-19 support and recovery, all to be proposed for inclusion in the May revision of the 2021-2022 state budget. We also have a link to the State of California or CalHR website, which hosts the current agreement between the state of California and CCPU. So happy to add that link in chat for you all as well. With that, if we can move to the next slide, please. Thank you. Perfect, thank you. So on this slide, we just wanted to provide an overview of the stakeholder engagement that we've had the opportunity to conduct so far related to the transition. First, we have our quarterly stakeholder calls, and to date, the Department of Social Services has held 3 quarterly stakeholder meetings, not counting this one, with just over 1,000 participants and stakeholders from around the state. This quarterly webinar series provides updates on all things related to the transition, as well as identified focus areas that our stakeholders have elevated in previous settings and sessions, as well as offered next steps and how folks can continue to engage throughout this process. In addition to our quarterly stakeholder meetings, we also hosted the topically based listening sessions on topics, again, raised by our stakeholder communities as they've identified priorities throughout the stakeholder engagement process. So last quarter of 2020, that winter quarter, we had 4 listening sessions, one around the contracting process, another around issues and challenges faced by our rural communities in California, another session based on equity, and then our 4th session that wrapped up that 4th quarter of 2020 was around the whole child, whole family approaches to service delivery. Again, these listening sessions were completed during that last quarter of 2020 calendar year and really intended to help gather feedback on specific issues around those 4 key topics. Those 4 key topics that had impacts related to the child care transfer. In February, we were able to release a detailed analysis of these listening sessions, gathering some themes from each of the sessions, key quotes, and recommendations from our stakeholders. And that brief is what we've been calling it, is provided on our stakeholder public-facing website on all things related to the child care transfer. We've called that document the Stakeholder Listening Session Summary Report. And so we will add that link and that resource for you all in chat, but we also, again, will have the link to the website that hosts all of these materials shared for you all in an upcoming slide as well. The feedback that we received during the listening session is highlighted, and we'll go into a little bit more detail in just a moment, but contains recommendations and considerations from our stakeholders that have been lifted by really a diverse community. So again, just gratitude for all of the participation and presence during all of these different sessions, and the completion and submission of all of the live feedback forms that we also hosted on our site that many of you engaged with. So again, appreciation for your participation on that front. We also had a series of transition plan walkthroughs that were hosted in both February and March. The walkthrough in February that we hosted provided our stakeholders with a guided review of the stakeholder listening session summary report that I just referenced, as well as the transition plan guide document. So the transition plan guide document details the full list of questions that were provided in statute that the transition plan was required to address. In addition to these questions, the transition plan guide document provided a summary of responses based on the information that folks would be able to find in the draft transition plan and ultimately in the final version of that transition plan. This second walkthrough that we hosted in March provided our stakeholders with a guided review of the child care and development transition plan draft, so the master transition plan document, which was available on our dedicated website for our stakeholders, was available there for public comment in both English and Spanish for a period of 3 weeks. Both walkthrough materials that I just referenced are also available on our dedicated website. We also posted last quarter our final version of the child care transition plan. Huge milestone, and we'll dive into that in a little bit more detail in an upcoming slide. We also have a link to the child care and transition plan guide that I just referenced as well, so happy to share that with you all in chat. We also worked closely with our partners at the California Department of Education on the CCDF, or Child Care Development Fund state plan. We hosted, our CDE hosted in partnership with our team here at DSS, the state plan public input sessions, which were held this past quarter. pursuant to federal requirements that the lead agency must convene a public hearing to provide an opportunity for the public to comment on the provision of childcare services and quality improvement activities within the plan before it is submitted to the federal government. So again, our partners at the California Department of Education, in collaboration with our team at Department of Social Services, hosted the session, following those federal guidelines that I just referenced. And that happened again this past quarter. Feedback received during these sessions were incorporated into the CCDF state plan, which will be released for public comment, or was released, apologies, for public comment on March 15th. And that public hearing, again, that I just referenced was on March 30th, and the public comment period has just ended. So appreciate, again, the engagement that folks had on that front in terms of providing that public comment to better inform the CCDF plan. As a reminder, the lead agency currently is CDE, but come July 1, when the plan is fully implemented, CDSS will then become the lead agency as part of the transition. We also have here parent engagement. So the California Department of Social Services has worked very closely with our partners over at Parent Voices California to help engage parents in our stakeholder listening sessions, as well as in these quarterly stakeholder calls. And then we also hosted a series in partnership, again, with Parent Voices, of parent focus groups to gather some critical feedback from our parent stakeholders throughout the transition process. And that engagement will be ongoing throughout the transition moving forward. In addition to our coordination with Parent Voices, we're also working closely with the Child Care Law Center and the California Child Care Resource and Referral Network to leverage any parent feedback in those settings as well, to ensure that we're getting that diverse participation and feedback from our network of stakeholders on that front as well. For the Early Childhood Policy Council, or ECPC, that has been another critical forum in terms of engaging stakeholders on that front. So have had the opportunity to participate in the regular council meetings, but in addition to those council meetings, have also had the opportunity to participate, in particular this last quarter, in the workforce subcommittee, as well as the parent advisory subcommittee. So excited to have had the opportunity to engage in both of those sessions to ensure, again, that we're gathering critical feedback from our stakeholder community, leveraging that platform moving forward. We typically engage and present to the Early Childhood Policy Council every quarter around when we release the quarterly stakeholder reports or quarterly update reports that Jennifer mentioned in a slide just a moment ago. With that, if we can go to the next slide, please, Corey. Thank you so much. And also this last quarter had the pleasure of announcing the appointment of Dr. Maria Guadalupe Jaime Millam, or Dr. Jaime Millam, as the Deputy Director of the Child Care and Development Division, which is the new division as part of the transition that will host a significant portion of the programs that are included in the transition. And so again, really excited to have the opportunity to welcome Dr. Lupe back in February. And just a little bit of background here on this slide, Dr. Jaime Millam was the Senior Director for the Early Care and Education Department at the Office of the Fresno County Superintendent of Schools from 2014 to 2020. Previous to that, she also served as the Deputy Director for the Central Valley Children's Services Network and has been diving straight into all things related to the transition. And so you will see her engaged in some of these stakeholder sessions moving forward as well. With that, I will turn things over to Lupe for the next slide.
Perfect. Thank you for that introduction too, and it's great to see everyone here. So if we can go to the next slide. So in regards to the Child Care and Development Transition Plan and Timeline, the final version of the plan and the transition key milestones and timeline is posted on our website. The plan was submitted to the legislator as mentioned on March 31st. And thank you for everyone for the constructive feedback that framed this plan, which is comprised of the following sections. So the first section was workforce and logistics. The next one is administration and transition, continuity of operations, programmatic transition, continuity of service and partnerships, continuous planning and engagement, program integrity and enhancement, child and adult care food program, continuity of operations, service and partnerships, alignment with recommendations for the master plan for early learning and care, making California for all kids, and finally the budget and fiscal outlook. For subsections, specifically specify how CDSS in partnership with CDE and stakeholders plan to meet the intent of the Early Childhood Development Act of 2020. The different links have been posted, but will continue to be posted throughout this session. Ensure that you have access to them. The other pieces that coming soon will be the Spanish version also that will be posted on the website. So with this, I will go ahead and pass it over to Jennifer.
Thank you. If we could have the next slide. Wonderful. So in addition to the child care programs that are transferring over to the Department of Social Services, we also have the Child and Adult Care Food Program, CACFP. We have been heavily engaged with CDE and our federal counterparts. I think the big highlight to report is that this quarter, just a few weeks ago, the US Department of Agriculture approved the transfer of the CACFP program from CDE to CDSS. I think many of you are likely familiar with the program, but for those that aren't, CACFP is a program that allows us to provide eligible children and adults in care settings to have access to nutritious foods. And it really helps to reinforce positive mealtime experiences, right? So definitely a critical partner in the work around childcare, but also in serving adults. CDSS and CDE have been engaged in developing a process to ensure that there are no disruptions in payments to providers for meals served once we get to this transition period of July 1st. And so with that, we have been engaged with USDA to make sure that we are receiving the support from them and adequately planning and putting things into place to make sure that that occurs. I know that we've heard from many of you, and CDE has certainly very much has prioritized the work that is happening around the COVID-19 response. And so I know that they've prioritized a lot of the work around CACFP in order to be able to get us to this place of July 1st. The other piece that we'd like to share is that the CACFP program will be its own branch. And so it will be a program that transfers over into the Family Engagement and Empowerment Division, which currently houses CalFresh, CalWorks, Housing and Homelessness, and soon to be CACFP. And so that's really critical to be alongside those other programs, to be able to work in collaboration with those programs, but also readily accessible and available to the other partner programs in childcare in the division. So with that, I will go to the next slide. Okay, in terms of upcoming activities, as we've discussed, there's been a lot of conversation and work going into place, and you'll find some highlights in the key milestones document. But contracts are certainly a hot topic. And so we are planning a webinar focused entirely on contracts. And so we will be sending out details soon, but we would encourage you to go on to the Child Care Transfer website to make sure that you're signed up for the updates, but also checking for upcoming events. As part of the public comment process, there were various questions that came up related to the transition plan. And so we are going to be posting a series of FAQs that we've gathered from that process. And so those will be posted shortly on the childcare transition website. And then finally, we look forward to the programs actually being transferred over to CDSS on July 1st. Next slide, please. Okay. Of course, as always, we welcome your feedback. I see there were a few suggestions in the chat already. We do have an ongoing survey that we would encourage you to fill out. You can go to the survey via the website, the bit.ly website there, or using the QR code. Simply open your camera function on your phone and put it over that QR code, and it'll take you directly to that webpage. And then the next piece is obviously more webinars to come to provide additional technical assistance and additional calls before the transfer takes place on July 1st of 2021. So stay tuned for more information. And with that, we'll go to the next slide. All right, I will thank you on my part and turn it over to Christina to give you a little bit more context here. But again, this is a great resource page to find additional information, the Child Care and Development Transition page. As always, if you have any questions, comments, feedback, feel free to use the Child Care Transition at dss.ca.gov email address for any questions or comments for us. And with that, I'll turn it over to Christina. Thank you.
Thanks so much, Jennifer. And I see a couple of comments on the survey and some folks unable to get access to that survey via the bit.ly link. So I'm going to go ahead and post the direct link to the survey that's on our webpage. Again, that's the Child Care Transition webpage in chat for folks as well. So thank you so much, Jennifer, for the overview. Lots of great, exciting opportunities to come. We've reached that moment in our presentation where we are going to allow you all a few minutes to go ahead and provide us comments, questions, either in chat, which we welcome throughout the presentation. But for now, if you have any questions for us, please enter those questions via chat. If you would like to verbally ask your question, we welcome that as well. And so for those of you who have engaged in these sessions before are familiar with this process, but for those of you who are new, we ask that you use the raise hand feature, which you should find access to on the bottom right hand of your screen. And if you utilize that raise hand feature, we can go ahead and unmute your line so you can ask the question to our team here. Again, ask questions via chat. If you'd like to verbally ask questions, please raise your hand. We'll go ahead and unmute you so you can ask your question to the team here. We're going to give folks just a couple of seconds. And while you are asking or thinking of the questions that you'd like to ask, or even providing us comments and feedback, we also have Lupe joining us with some common questions that we've received throughout the process over the last couple of months. And will also be a little bit of a sneak preview of what's to come in the FAQ document that we'll be releasing. And so she will go through some of those with us as well. We'll also share, as Jennifer mentioned, that FAQ document will be posted and shared with our stakeholders pretty soon here. And so any questions or big considerations that folks raise that we're unable to answer during this call will better inform that FAQ document in future documents that supplement. With that, I'll go ahead and give folks again just a few more seconds to go ahead and submit their questions or raise their hand, and then we'll go ahead and dive in. Thank you. Okay, while we wait for Lupe, we're having a little bit of audio technical issues. And again, Lupe is going to go through some of the questions that we've received throughout the stakeholder session, stakeholder engagement process. While we wait for the team to help with some of the audio issues, we do have a raised hand. So let me go ahead and unmute you. Let me see, where'd you go? Deborah Corley.
Thank you so much for unmuting me, and thank you so much for the hard work that the Department of Social Services is doing during this transition. I know it's difficult, but we as family daycare providers are in it together with you. So my question is, the management bulletins that the Department of Education has for providers access to, will we still have access to those management bulletins? And if so, of course, all the rules and regulations automatically transfer over to the Department of Social Services, correct?
Thank you for that question, Debbie. And I know, like I said earlier, I think Lupe's having some audio issues, but I will share the transfer of those policy documents as well as any historical reference documents have been a part of the transition discussion and process and will be made accessible post-transition to ensure that that historical information is preserved. So we'll share that. In addition to that, we are also working very closely with our IT teams to develop a landing page for all programs impacted by the transition on our site as well. For the moment, we do have the master transition site, which has a tremendous amount of information, and we recognize that there is more information to come. And so as those pieces develop, Deborah, we will make sure to share that out with our stakeholder community as well. Jennifer, Lupe, did folks want to add anything else? I know we referenced this slightly in the transition plan document, but again, this is very much a work in progress as we ensure that those materials are made available to folks.
Yes, Christina, the only other piece I would add, great question, that is the management bulletins and those policy documents are certainly one of the priorities for us in making sure that we can transfer over those documents. We do have certain requirements that we are held to, right? Ensuring that they're accessible. And so there will be a process to make sure that those are vetted and ready to be posted publicly on our website. But yes, the policy documents are definitely one of the priority documents.
Okay, with that, I see a couple of additional questions are raised hands as we again fix Lupe's audio. So I am going to go ahead and move things over to Oscar Ting to ask his question. So Oscar, I'm going to go ahead and unmute your line now.
Hi, yeah, my name's Oscar. I'm from California Family Childcare Network. I would like to ask, is there any plan for the CCLD in the long run to include more language such as Chinese, Russian, Vietnamese, for limited English proficiency providers to be informed for policy changes or input? I consider this is language equity.
Thank you so much for that question, Oscar, and that is definitely a priority of the departments. As many of you know, and we've had in some of our previous discussions, the director of our Office of Equity, Marcela Ruiz. And so I know that language access is something that we're exploring in terms of expansion department-wide. And as folks contribute the feedback and comments, wanting to make not just some of the materials that we have more accessible in terms of language access, but these stakeholder engagement and listening sessions. So really appreciate the feedback that folks have shared. I know that this has also been an item that we've discussed in some of our other work groups and sessions on developing content material related to the transition. And so we'll remain a priority as we kind of move things forward and have, again, these materials made available on our site. Jennifer, I know there may be some additional information that we wanted to share. Just wanting to make sure I'm not missing anything with that response.
I think that's all right. Oscar, I think the other piece that we've been planning for and are starting to implement our plan around is in terms of the language availability on our website. And so that is part of the plan. I think initially there is likelihood that we will have, not everything will appear on July 1st. And so just want to make sure that folks are patient with us as we gear up to transfer information and can sort of in waves start to translate into other languages.
Perfect. Christina, can you hear me?
Yes.
Oh, wonderful.
Yes, we can.
Wonderful, wonderful. I love technology. So there was questions in regards to forms and also whether individuals plan to, whether they should proceed to enroll families. And so our response is yes, please continue to enroll families with the existing CDE form. CDE and CDSS are coordinating on the transfer of the CDE forms to CDSS website. In some aspects, the forms will remain the same, except the CDE name and logo will be replaced. When CDSS determines the new form or determines a new form is needed, CDSS will engage with the field to share proposed changes and gather feedback, similar to a form like this, or provide technical assistance to use the form and deliver notifications in advance for the implementation and changes to the enrollment process of releasing new forms and process changing.
Lupe, as you explore some of the other questions that are bubbling up in chat, and again, appreciation to all of you for submitting questions and feedback via chat. And just as a reminder, you can actually select the raise hand option on the bottom right hand of your screen and select the reaction piece for the access to the raise hand option. But there's a question in here, a logistical question on the release of the FAQ document that we've been referencing. And it's whether or not the document will be released only online, meaning that folks would have to monitor the website in order to be informed of that release. And the answer to that question, Bridget, is that we do plan on sending out an email to all folks who are part of our listserv, which we have, I think, a couple thousand folks listed on that listserv. And so that email will, or once that FAQ document lands on our site, we'll make sure to send that notice out to those folks that are on our listserv. If you'd like to join our listserv and you don't believe you're already registered, you can email us at cctransition@dss.ca.gov and we can make sure you're signed up. I'll go ahead and pop that email address into chat for folks as well.
Thank you, Christina. This is Jen Troya, Chief Deputy Director at the Department of Social Services, and I just wanted to address a couple of the questions in the chat as well. There are a few questions related to policy changes. So one I saw asked about policies and differences between stages 1 and stage 2 of the CalWORKs childcare program. And there were some others about regulations. And similar to the response that Lupe gave related to forms, I just really wanted to emphasize our priority on engagement with all of you and on the fact that right now what we are doing is moving the programs and concentrating on a smooth transition and transfer of the programs. Any policy changes that require statutory change or regulatory change are things that will be proposed after engagement with the field. through regular processes. So you can expect to hear from us if those things are proposed through the budget process or through other formal processes, and we will look forward to those engagements with you. You will not expect or should not expect to see from us other changes that would be unexpected or that we've not engaged with you about at that policy level. So just wanted to highlight that, that for all of you.
So I will jump on another question that has come up is Head Start moving over to CDSS as a result of the transition? And the early Head Start grant funding will continue to be administered by CDE after July 1st, 2021, in order to ensure that the state does not have recompetition for this funding. The Head Start Collaboration Office is moving over to CDSS. The State Collaboration Office is responsible for administrating the programs, is not responsible for administrating the programs, but rather focus on connecting and alignment of early care programs and safety net services throughout California.
Hi, Deborah. I see that your hand is raised and your comment in chat. So I'm going to go ahead and unmute your line to ask your question.
Beautiful. Thank you once again. I have two questions, actually. I know that CDE has a list of consultants for providers if they have any questions on a management bulletin or so. So I would like to know if the Department of Social Services also has a list of consultants that providers can go to if they have any questions about PINs. My second question is, for providers on reimbursement, will the reimbursement time remain the same, or will there be a change? Will the schedule change in how agencies and networks pay providers, or will it remain the same as well as be on time after July 1st? Thank you.
Hi, Deborah, let me take your first question in regards to the consultants. So we know that CDE's consultants are going to shift over, some of them are going to shift over to CDSS, and others will stay with CDE. Our goal is to be able to provide a list of consultants to the organizations, as well as have it posted on the website, so you know who are the consultants in what regions. Originally, our goal is as much as possible to ensure that agencies are able to stay with the same consultants, because we realize that relationships are important. But we also recognize that some changes may happen since we have some contracts that are going to remain at CDE. So that's the first question that I want to make sure that I acknowledge, and also ensure that will be mentioned that it will be on the website itself, the information. The other question had to do with apportionments, right, or payments in a sense. And so we know that currently CDSS and CDE are focusing on the lift and shifting, all identified as the transferring of programs under CDE administrating to CDSS. As part of that transfer work, CDE and CDSS will collaborate to ensure that there's no disruptions in contracting and payment processing. Currently, there's no immediate changes to contracting and the payment process that will be implemented by July 1st, 2021. The two departments are drafting the interagency agreements to continue operations that are supported by CDE and CDSS, automatic systems that are being developed, right? So that's tied with apportionments, et cetera. Once these systems are developed and ready to be launched, CDSS will communicate with stakeholders via webinar and emails, and will provide the technical assistance on any new systems if needed. Okay, there was also another question in regards to the hold and harmless approach, right, with contractors, if that will continue post July 1st. The hold harmless approach in the contractors is currently in effect until June 30th, 2021. An extension of this timeframe would require a statutory change. So we want to make sure that we are able to lift that up so you're aware of what is the process if that continues. So I believe there was another question in regards to whether you will have a CDE consultant for multiple contracts now that it's been separated. Now, for instance, CSPP will be with CDE and CCTR would be with CSPP. And the answer is yes, you will have a consultant and a fiscal analyst under CDSS. And you will also have a consultant and a fiscal analyst under CDE. Okay, there's also a question that is coming up, the program self-evaluation and whether that's going to be different, right? There's no change. There will be, I'm sorry, I can't talk here. There will not be any changes to the PSE process for 2021. The PSE requirements are described, as you know, in California Code of Regulations, Title 5, Section 18270.5. The PSE is due to CDE by June 1st each year, and this due date and process will remain the same for 2020. CDSS will engage with contractors and release written instructions in the first quarter of 2021 to provide notice of any requirement changes to the submission of process and requirements on PSE due to CDSS on June 1st, 2022.
Lupe, this is Selena. If I could jump in for just a second. This is Selena Chow, Chief Operating Officer at CDSS, and I see that there was a question in the chat regarding the additional positions that were requested and whether that would take funding from children and families, and why is there the need for those additional positions when CDE staff are being moved. So there are a number of CDE staff being moved, but there are some staff being retained in certain core areas and functions, such as accounting and other administrative functions. So some of the additional request is for some of those necessary for business operations. And there are some additional requests for programmatic positions as well as research related positions to ensure that we have a transition into the future with success and successful operations. And to respond to the question about the funding, this is all additional new funding that we have requested from the state. So there is no intention to redirect any funding from the programs today.
There was also a question in regards to the threshold for purchasing. And so I'm going to take that question back and make sure that it's also answered in the frequently asked questions that we're going to be posting towards the end of the month or beginning of May. And I also want to just call that out too, that if there is questions that we're not able to get to, because there's quite a few that are coming up, then we want to make sure that you are able to find those questions at the frequently asked questions segment on the website. Okay, so there is another question in regards to which department will be issuing contracts for fiscal year 2022 and the timeline for July 1st funding for CSBP, General Child Care and Development, CCTR, and Quality Counts California. So in general, the different ones. For the child care and development programs that will be transferring to CDSS, CDE and CDSS are finalizing an agreement that will allow CDE to complete execution of pending fiscal year 2021-22 agreements under CDE's existing program and timelines on behalf of CDSS. Funding for July 1st, 2021 agreement will be issued by CDSS per associated contractual agreement at the cadence consistent with existing CD practices. Once funding becomes available for disbursement after finalization and enactment of the 2021 Budget Act. I believe there's also a question in regards to the engagement of centers. And I do want to also call out that we have just recently had a focus group through Every Child California that focused on both Title V centers as well as private centers. And so we took that information back that we learned during that stakeholder feedback, and we'll also continue to have the opportunity to continue to engage centers directly moving forward too, and there'll be other opportunities for engagement similar to the one that we Every Child California was able to host. I would also call it, as we're receiving feedback in regards to individuals wanting to be part of the engagement, is that we have our email there that you're always able to provide questions or statements or suggestions. And we want to make sure that we're able to fully partner with everyone, right? And make sure that everyone has a voice. Because right now, obviously, we're having conversations about pre-transition, but we also want to have conversations through the stakeholder feedback and other focus groups in the future on post-transition. And so there is going to be opportunities for that too. So we welcome for sure individuals that would like to reach out for those. So I'm going to just acknowledge a concern that was lifted in regards to having the two consultants. and not necessarily feel like it's being streamlined. And so we just want to acknowledge that that is something that will happen, and we understand that that streamlining may not be completely across every single piece of this transition. But again, our biggest goal is to ensure that you have the consultant that's able to support you for the contracts that are moving over to CDSS, as well as the fiscal individual that can support you. So there was another statement in regards to the state was meeting with CCPU to discuss the use of funds, as our center-based direct contractors going to be included in the process as well. Some issues are the same, but some are different for center-based contractors. And of course, we want to remind everyone that there's also the legislative process, right, that we are also able to access to make sure that we are able to support, to be able to get our voices through. And always through our stakeholder feedback, we're constantly being able to have opportunities to be able to partner with you and hear the pieces that are important to you. Okay, I'm going to hopefully ping Selena on this next question. Selena, can someone unmute her?
Yes, I'm unmuted. Thank you.
Wonderful.
So again, this is Selena Chow. I want to address the question about the transfer intending to save money. So the transfer was not necessarily a savings proposal, but there was an intent to be a lift and shift. And so to the extent where a lift and shift was possible, we were able to identify positions and certain key elements of the program that would be lifted and shifted from CDE to CDSS. But in the process, we also identified certain key areas and opportunities where we can really provide additional support to ensure the success of not just the transition, but the programs moving forward. So that is why there were additional requests made.
Okay, so there's also another question in regards to the Family Child Care Home Educational Networks, otherwise known as Fetchins, and wondering if there would be some changes. So currently, as we know, there are various contracts that represent Fetchins that include the California Family Child Care CFCC, California Migrant Child Care and Development Program, CMIG, General Care and Development Program, CCTR, and California State Preschool Program, CSPP. Those can be operated, some of those can be operated through a center base or a family child care home network. And I'm generalizing for sure because there's a little bit more to this for sure. Of these three contracts will be moving to CDSS as part of the transfer, CFCC, CMIG, and CCTR, if they're operated through a Fetchin, of course, and then also center-based moving over. And only the Fetchin within the state preschool program will stay at CDE. Right now, CDSS and CDE are focusing on the lifting and shifting of all transferring programs under CDE's administration to CDSS. while also ensuring CDE has the capacity to support the remaining programs. There's no immediate policy proposal to the veterans, and any potential changes would need to be approved through the legislative or regulatory process. As applicable, this would be pursuant as a collaboration and joint effort by both departments with the intent to support and guide policy for the veterans. As specific in the transition plan, our goal is for the alignment of the master plan of early care and early learning and care, and to prioritize workforce strategies and improve quality, which includes expanding support for participation in the veteran. And I believe we also have another question that I'm going to ping Selena on, if she's able to unmute, in regards to the transfer between CSPP and CCTR.
Sure, this is Selena again. So CDSS and CDE are working with Department of Finance on a solution to provide the funding flexibility as previously had for contractors that serve both CDE and CDSS programs. The solution will offer the departments the authority to adjust their budgets to address the need. So it'd be the ability to increase the contract in one department and decrease in the other, or vice versa between the CDE preschool contracts and the CDSS childcare contracts. This is all still in the works and subject to budget approval process with the legislature. And we are still working out the details on the mechanics of how this will all work and how to track the balances in the contracts between the two departments. So we will definitely keep contractors updated on the details as we know more, but it is something that we are actively working on to try to preserve the flexibility that contractors have had in the past. While I'm on, I also wanted to just mention through this whole process, we are exploring opportunities for efficiencies and streamlining and other types of changes to the program administration to make things easier. We do recognize that exploring some of those changes do take time to work out what is the best solution. So there are opportunities to seek out what those efficiencies will be, but it may not be, between now and the July 1st transition. Our priority first and foremost is to make sure that we are able to effectively transfer the programs and not have any disruption in the payments. And then we will move towards other efficiencies or improvements from there. So more to come for sure. I just wanted everyone to know that there are a number of things we're still working on, and we will share as soon as we're able to.
So I appreciate all the comments in regards to engagement and wanting to participate in addition to these sessions. And so just want to mention that we're going to take that back. And I know that it had been recommended through a previous stakeholder group that we attended, that the possibility of work groups, right, to be able to also think through some of these future policy recommendations, suggestions, etc. And so we are going to go ahead and take that information back, and that's something that we will have in consideration. And again, I will redirect everyone to this website, because as we are developing those opportunities, we will make sure to post it there too.
Thanks, Lupe. And I just wanted to add to what Selena was sharing earlier about the intent of the transition, and to bring us back to, this is Jen Troya again, to bring us back to the slides at the beginning of the presentation about the real purpose here being the integration and coordination of the overall system of early learning and care, or child care and development, with the goals of promoting the high quality, affordable system that comprehensively and effectively serves children and families. So while we have an enormous amount of work to do right now to get the transfer to happen smoothly and to ensure efficiencies in the operations, we do also have our eye on so many of the critical improvements that have been lifted up in our listening sessions and in multiple engagements with all of you, and that have been known to the field for quite some time. So really want to appreciate your continuing engagement with us and holding that longer term vision with us of both the smooth transfer in the short term here and also that longer term vision that we all share and are really driving toward.
Okay, so there's another question in regards to as general child care and development programs, which is referenced as CCTR programs, move to CDSS. Does that mean that Title V will no longer apply to them with regardless to licensing? So currently, CDSS and CDE are focusing on the lift and shift, all identified transferring programs under CDE administration to CDSS. There's no changes to the licensing standards of the programs, including the CCTR contract. Title V will still apply to CCTR programs.
With that, I think we want to thank you all again for joining us this afternoon and for all of your comments and questions. So appreciate the desire within them for engagement. We share that interest in staying connected closely as we ensure the success of this transition in the short term and the vision over the longer term. So thank you all so much, and we very much look forward to continuing to engage with you in the coming weeks, months, and years as we move toward that shared vision.